Freedom of speech is a very important part of American culture. It means being allowed to publicly share your opinion without fear of punishment. It is one of the most controversial topics of modern culture.
However, absolute freedom of speech is a very dangerous thing. This means being able to say whatever you want, whenever you want, with no consequences whatsoever. This includes public swearing, stereotypes, and judgments, plus intentional hazards such as 911 prank calls or shouting fire in a theater.
How do you define freedom of speech?
The rights our forefathers intended to protect, that we could openly share and discuss our beliefs on politics and religion and social mores and values without persecution by our government.
Whoa. How free do you think the speech should be?
That's a very hard question. I would have to ponder it a long time to give a truly good answer.
You don't need
My
to be very
gut
detailed.
response is that freedom of speech's only limits should be when that speech impedes on the rights of others to live peacefully, and when that speech puts forth a message that whose intention is to tear at the fabric of a functional society, and promotes acts that are commit sins against and crimes against children and women and groups of people who belong to an ethnic group or a minority. And that is a dangerous thing in itself to say, because those very values have been altered and changed as we go through time, and as our society has evolved, and so that's what makes it a really tough question.
Okay. So, do you have any life stories you'd like to share about freedom of speech and how it's impacted your life?
Well, growing up as a teen and young woman in the 70s, I recall very much as a very young girl the protests against the war in Vietnam, and the first group of young men coming home from that war in our neighborhood with limbs missing, and young men with their fractured hold on life and reality, and the protests, as I recalled them on the news, and how my parents would talk about them, as these kids being really wild and causing a dangerous situation, quickly evolved to a very important voice to be heard that reflected the truth of the damage being done to a whole generation of young men who were, through the system of service at that time, were being called into service against their will.
And yet they were being blamed.
So it's really important to, yes. I thought it was my interview.
Oh. What exactly is your definition of abuse of freedom of speech?
To claim that the First Amendment allows me to stand up and say that certain proclivities I have a right to talk about, I just can't act on.
We took a survey on how free speech should be and how free it is. The different columns represent the answers to how free it should be, except the last column is the total for the other question. It looks like 15% of people think we have too much freedom, 60% of people think we have too little freedom, and 30% of people think that it's just right.
Our school districts are not there to teach and ingrain into our students a particular orthodoxy. They're not to decide what is right and what is wrong on questions of social importance. Those are to be left to parents and other institutions. And that has been our law since 1943. It warns against this type of indoctrination to try to teach students of a particular whatever it is, whatever view it is. This happens to be the homosexual rights issue, but it could be on any issue. Now, any departure from absolute regimentation may cause trouble. Any variation from the majority's opinion may inspire fear. Any spoken word in class, in the lunchroom, or on the campus that deviates from the views of another person may start an argument or cause a disturbance. But our Constitution says we must take this risk. And our history says that it is this sort of hazardous freedom, this kind of openness, that is the basis of our national strength and of the independence and vigor of Americans who grow up and live in this relatively permissive, often disputatious society.
In America, you're allowed to swear, speak against America in times of war, or create a sacrilegious movie, but you're not allowed to use monetary campaign promises, shout fire in a theater, or use false or misleading advertisement. In addition, if you perform an act of perjury, which is lying under oath in court, you can get a fine of up to $10,000 plus a prison sentence of up to 5 years.
Basically, you can badmouth America or public officials unless it could cause an evil that could bring down America. You may remain silent in court, but you may not use lies to increase your standings politically or financially. In advertisement, you must fully iterate all requirements for discounts and use accurate and non-misleading information.